While serving a VIP passenger, I trembled seeing the face of my husband, who was buried 5 years ago. His mother had told me he was burned beyond recognition. I intentionally spilled hot coffee on his thigh to test him. He instinctively screamed my name. As I looked at his hands, I realized, but before the story begins, please write in the comments what city you are watching this story from. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel. The gentle hum of the jet engines, piercing through the clouds at 30,000 feet, was usually my calming music. But today, it sounded like the ticking of a time bomb. I smoothed down my flight attendant uniform, ensuring the silk scarf at my neck was tied perfectly, and then took a deep breath. 5 years. It had been 5 years since I was thrown out of that house with nothing but the clothes on my back. 5 years since I was forced to believe that my husband, Ethan, had been incinerated in a tragic car accident on the interstate. 5 years I had spent crawling out of the abyss of poverty, washing dishes in a greasy spoon diner, studying foreign languages during my short breaks, until I could finally stand here in the business class cabin of a major international airline. Chloe, could you please assist the passengers in seats 1A and 1B? They requested black coffee, no sugar. My lead flight attendant, Angela, said, snapping me out of my daydream. Of course, Angela, I replied briskly. I prepared the silver tray, the rich aroma of Arabica coffee filling my nostrils. With the measured steps I had practiced hundreds of times, I walked toward the front row. Seats 1A and 1B were the most exclusive. Their occupants were certainly not ordinary people. When I arrived beside seat 1A, a man was staring at his tablet, reading complex stock market charts. He wore an expensive charcoal gray suit. His hair was slicked back neatly, and a gold watch encircled his wrist. "Excuse me, sir, here is your coffee," I said softly, putting on my best professional smile. The man didn't look up. He just gave an arrogant nod while continuing to scroll through his high-tech gadget. But as I was about to place the porcelain cup on his tray table, he tilted his head slightly toward the window. The sunlight hit his profile. My heart stopped. My world seemed to collapse in an instant. The tray in my hands shook so violently that the small spoon on it clinked loudly. It was not just a resemblance. It was him. The sharp nose, slightly crooked at the tip. The small mole under his left ear. The strong jawline I used to caress every morning before he left for his job as a warehouse worker, living paycheck to paycheck. Ethan. It couldn't be. Ethan was dead. My own mother-in-law had cried hysterically in front of that closed casket. She said his body was destroyed by the fire. She was the one who threw me out right after the funeral, accusing me of being a bad-luck wife who caused the death of her beloved son. "Hey, what are you doing?" A sharp reprimand from the woman in seat 1B jolted me. The woman was beautiful, young, and radiated an aura of dazzling wealth. She looked at me with disgust, seeing my trembling hands holding the tray over the man's lap. The shock in my chest turned into something hot. If this was a dream, I wanted to wake up. But if this was real, the rage I had suppressed for 5 years suddenly boiled over, incinerating my common sense. I had to know. I had to be sure. Unconsciously, or perhaps semi-consciously, I tilted the tray. Whoosh! The piping hot, dark black coffee spilled entirely onto the expensive trousers the man was wearing. Right on his thigh area. Ah, damn it, hot! The man screamed reflexively, jumping up from his seat while swatting at his pants. His face was red, contorted in pain and shock. His eyes widened, staring at me, and in that fatal second, his mouth moved faster than his brain. "Chloe, are you crazy?" Silence. The entire business class cabin suddenly went quiet. That voice echoed in my ears. "Not ma'am, not miss, but Chloe." He said my name with an intonation I knew by heart. The same intonation he used to use when he'd ask me to make him instant ramen in the middle of the night. My brow furrowed as I stared at him sharply. My breath quickened. "Do you know me?" I asked. My voice was hoarse and demanding. The man flinched. He realized he had made a fatal mistake. His eyes darted nervously, glancing at the woman beside him who was now standing with a furious expression. He quickly changed his demeanor. The cold mask was back in place. "What are you talking about? Your name is right there on your name tag." He He snapped harshly, pointing at my left breast. "Who can't read? What kind of service is this? My wife could sue your airline." "Honey, are you okay?" The woman beside him, whom he called his wife, immediately grabbed a napkin and began dabbing at his pants in a panic. She turned to me, her eyes blazing. "Are you blind or something? My husband could get second-degree burns. Call your manager now. I want you fired." I didn't move. My feet felt nailed to the cabin floor. My eyes were locked on the man's face. He avoided my gaze. He busied himself with the coffee stain, pretending to be occupied so he wouldn't have to look into my eyes. "I'm sorry. I'll get a wet towel," I mumbled stiffly. I knelt down, pretending I wanted to help clean the stain on his pants, even though the woman swatted my hand away harshly. "Don't touch my husband. Go away." However, my eyes caught something as the sleeve of his suit jacket rode up slightly from his frantic movements. On his right wrist was a long, crescent-shaped burn scar. The same scar he got 5.5 years ago when we were trying to cook in our cramped rental apartment and hot oil splattered onto his hand. I remembered vividly how I blew on the wound while crying because we didn't have money for expensive ointment. This man had the exact same scar. I looked up into his eyes, which now radiated pure fear. He was not a stranger. He was not a ghost. My husband, who had died 5 years ago, was now sitting in a VIP seat, wearing a suit that cost what I used to make in a year, and had just been defended by his new wife. My blood boiled. My hands were shaking so violently that I had to grip the edge of the galley sink to keep from collapsing. My breathing was short and shallow, as if the oxygen supply in the cabin had suddenly thinned. The image of the man in seat 1A kept replaying in my head like a nauseating, broken record. That scar, that voice, that look of panic. "Chloe, you look pale. Are you feeling all right?" Angela, the lead flight attendant who had asked me to serve the VIP section, inquired. Her face was filled with concern, seeing me look like I'd just seen a ghost. I'm just a little dizzy, ma'am. Probably from the turbulence earlier." I lied. My voice sounded distant, as if it wasn't coming from my own throat. "Well, sit down for a bit. I'll handle the front for a while." "Go have some hot tea," she said sympathetically before pulling back the curtain to the business class cabin. I sank onto the crew's jump seat. I closed my eyes and instantly a time warp dragged me back to the past, to that dark, wet, and grim day 5 years ago. The rain was pouring down heavily that day, as if the sky itself was weeping for my fate. I stood in the public cemetery in a worn, soaking wet black dress. In front of me, a mound of fresh red earth was still wet. A simple wooden marker was stuck in it, reading, "Ethan Miller, beloved son." There was no body for me to see one last time. The casket was sealed shut, nailed tight. "Don't open it. His face is destroyed. Do you want to be traumatized for life?" My mother-in-law had snapped at me back then. Her shrill voice echoed in the hospital corridor, making me shrink. She said the accident on the interstate caused Ethan's car to explode, and his body was burned completely. I was a foolish wife, sick with a high fever in our rental apartment at the time, and I could only wail and cry, believing every word that came out of her mouth. But my tears hadn't even dried when she did something crueler than death itself. Returning from the funeral, I found my suitcases already on the porch of our small rental apartment. A trash bag filled with my clothes was scattered, soaked by the rain. "Starting today, right this second, you get out." My mother-in-law stood in the doorway, staring at me with a look of pure hatred I had never seen before. There were no tears left on her old face, only raw dislike. "Martha, Ethan was just buried. This is our home," I sobbed, trying to reach for her hand. "Our home?" "Ha!" She slapped my hand away so hard I stumbled. "This apartment is leased in my son's name. And since my son is dead because of the bad luck you brought, you have no rights here anymore. It's in a now. The insurance, the savings, the car, it's all mine as his biological mother. You're just a barren wife who couldn't even give Ethan a child before he died young." Those words stabbed my chest harder than any knife. I was kicked out like a stray cat on the day of my own husband's funeral, without a single dollar, without a place to go. I was homeless for 3 days, sleeping in a bus station, before I finally got a job washing dishes at a diner. I suffered. I starved. I even wanted to follow Ethan to the grave. I was so desperate. And now, my eyes opened again to the cold cabin wall of the airplane. The sadness that had been crushing my chest slowly morphed into something darker, hotter. That man, Ethan, he was alive. He wasn't burned to a crisp. He was sitting comfortably in a seat worth thousands of dollars, sipping expensive coffee, being doted on by a new wife who looked like a porcelain doll, while I had nearly starved to death mourning him. What kind of lie was this? What sick charade were they playing? I stood up. My dizziness was replaced by a surge of adrenaline. I had to confirm one more thing. I needed written proof. With quick but silent steps, I grabbed the company tablet lying on the crew's work counter. My fingers danced across the screen, opening the passenger manifest application. My heart pounded as I scrolled down, looking for the passenger data in seat 1A. There, displayed clearly, was the man's information. Name: Alexander Croft. Status: Platinum member. Not Ethan Miller. My knees went weak, but I forced my eyes to keep reading the details. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was just a doppelganger who happened to have the same scar. It's a big world, right? I tapped on his passenger profile for more details. Date of birth: the 12th of May, 1990. Exactly the same as Ethan's birthday. But that wasn't enough. It could be a coincidence. I scrolled further down, looking for the emergency contact field. VIP passengers usually filled this out for urgent needs. My eyes widened as I read the very last line. My breath caught in my throat. It felt like an invisible hand was slapping me across the face, back and forth. There, in the emergency contact field, was a name and a phone number I knew by heart. A number I used to call all the time to check in. A number that always berated me if I was slow to answer. Emergency contact: Martha Miller. Martha Miller was my mother-in-law's name. The tablet nearly slipped from my hands. The puzzle was solved, unequivocally. There was no more doubt. Alexander was Ethan, and Martha, the old woman who threw me out using her son's death as an excuse, she knew everything. They conspired. They faked Ethan's death, cashed in the insurance, threw me away like trash, and then built a new life with a new identity. Tears streamed down my face, not from sadness, but from a silent, explosive rage. They were enjoying luxury built on my suffering. They were laughing over my tears. Suddenly, the galley curtain was yanked open. I flinched and quickly turned off the tablet screen. A man stood there. His face was tense, his jaw clenched. It was him. Ethan, or as he now called himself, Alexander. He was standing 2 feet in front of me. He had followed me to the galley. He stared at me intently, then hissed softly with a voice that made the hairs on my arm stand up. "We need to talk. Now." The air in the cramped aircraft galley suddenly felt suffocating. We were only a step apart. The scent of expensive cologne, a mix of musk and sandalwood, emanated from him, replacing the smell of sweat and cheap aftershave that used to greet me when he came home from work. The man before me looked so foreign, but his eyes, those dark brown eyes, still belonged to Ethan. "We need to talk," he repeated, his low tone heavy with emphasis. I swallowed hard, trying to gather what little courage I had left. My hands clenched into fists at my sides, my nails digging into my palms until it hurt. "Talk about what, Ethan?" My voice trembled, half holding back tears, half holding back fury. "That you're still alive? That the grave I cried over for 5 years is empty? Or about that woman next to you?" The man didn't flinch. There was no guilt on his face. Instead, a cynical smirk played on his lips, an expression I had never seen during our 5 years of marriage. The Ethan I knew was a gentle, compliant man, not this cold individual who looked at me as if I were dirt on his expensive shoes. "Listen carefully, miss," he hissed, leaning his face closer until I was forced to step back, bumping into a service cart. "My name is Alexander Croft. I don't know who Ethan is, and I don't care about your pathetic little drama." My breath hitched. He delivered the denial so smoothly, as if he had practiced it 1,000 times in front of a mirror. "Don't lie," I shot back, my voice rising an octave. "I saw the scar on your wrist. I saw your emergency contact information. Your mother's name is there. Do you think I'm stupid?" His strong hand suddenly gripped my wrist. Tight, painful. Shh. His eyes blazed with a fierce intensity. Lower your voice. Do you want me to report you to the airline for harassing a VIP passenger, intentionally spilling hot coffee, and now making insane accusations? He released my wrist roughly, causing me to stumble. You might be stressed from your job, or maybe you just have psychiatric problems, he continued, calmly straightening his suit. If you approach me or my wife again, or dare to look at us with those crazy eyes, I will make sure this uniform is stripped from you today. Understood? Without waiting for my answer, he turned around. The curtain swished shut, and his broad back disappeared back into the business class cabin, returning to be the perfect husband to another woman. I sank to the floor. My legs had completely given out. Gaslighting. He was twisting the facts. He wanted to make me doubt my own sanity. He wanted me to believe that I was the one who was crazy for seeing a ghost. Chloe. Oh my God. Why are you sitting on the floor? My lead flight attendant came in with a panicked look. I quickly wiped away the tears that had escaped. I'm fine, Angela. I just slipped a little. My shoes are slick. I got up, forcing a smile that felt painful on my lips. No, I couldn't fall apart now. If I cried or made a scene, he would win. He would have a reason to get me fired and discard me again like he did 5 years ago. I had to play this smart. The rest of the flight was pure torture. I had to go back to the cabin, hand out hot towels and collect trash with a neutral expression. I saw Ethan. No, Alexander. He was laughing heartily with his new wife. Occasionally she would feed him pieces of fruit. The sight burned my retinas, but I held it in. By the time the plane's wheels finally touched the tarmac at LAX, I had already formulated a crazy plan. As soon as the aircraft door opened and the VIP passengers were allowed to disembark first, I asked my senior for a quick restroom break. In reality, I slipped away to grab my purse, removed my uniform scarf, and put on a large black hoodie I always carried to cover my identity on my way home. I jogged through the arrivals terminal, maintaining a safe distance of about 20 yards behind the treacherous couple. My heart pounded like a war drum. I felt like an amateur detective in a crime movie, except the stakes were my own life. If Ethan saw me tailing him, he would surely do something drastic. They walked toward the private car pickup area, not the taxi stand, not the airport shuttle. A special area where gleaming black luxury cars were lined up. I hid behind a large concrete pillar, peeking out with bated breath. A brand new white Cadillac Escalade pulled up right in front of them. A uniformed chauffeur got out and opened the door respectfully. Ethan and his new wife smiled broadly, but it wasn't the luxury of the car that made my blood run cold. It was the figure sitting in the middle seat, who now lowered the car's window automatically. That face. The face that, 5 years ago, had pointed at me while screaming vile words. The face that said she didn't have money for Ethan's memorial. The face that said she was all alone and sickly. My mother-in-law, Martha. She was sitting there, wearing a modern, expensive lace dress. A string of pearls, with beads as large as marbles, adorned her neck. Her face was vibrant, fully made up, and her smile bloomed wide as she greeted her supposedly dead son. Oh, my beautiful daughter-in-law and my handsome son are here. That voice, the same shrill voice that had thrown me out. Ethan got into the car and hugged his mother. The three of them laughed together like a perfect, happy family. My world spun violently. So, she knew all along. She wasn't a victim. She was the director. As the luxury car slowly pulled away from the airport curb, I saw the license plate. It was a vanity plate. The last 3 letters were ETH. My hand trembled as I reached for my phone in my jacket pocket. I hadn't managed to take a picture of them, but I had memorized that plate number. My tears dried up instantly. The sadness was replaced by a bone-chilling cold. They thought they had gotten rid of me. They thought the old Chloe, the foolish and obedient one, still existed. They were dead wrong. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a business card from an old friend, a lawyer I had helped on a flight a year ago. He had told me, if you ever need legal help or need to teach some bad people a lesson, call me. I stared at the disappearing Escalade with a murderous gaze. Welcome back, Ethan, I whispered to the hot Los Angeles wind. The game has just begun. My studio apartment was tiny, maybe 150 square feet, The cream-colored walls were peeling in the corners from the damp. There was no air conditioning, just an old fan that spun with a noisy rattle, trying to fight off the oppressive California heat. I sat cross-legged on my thin foam mattress. My laptop glowed brightly in the dark room, a stark contrast to the luxury of the business-class cabin from that morning. Even more so, compared to the leather seats of the Escalade that had carried my husband away. That name kept throbbing in my head. Alexander Croft. My cold fingers typed the name into the search bar. Enter. Thousands of results appeared in a fraction of a second. That face, Ethan's face, now named Alexander, filled my screen. Alexander Croft, CEO of Croft Enterprises, a young, successful entrepreneur who built a real estate empire in 5 years. I was no Don. I clicked on a prominent business news article published 2 years ago. My eyes greedily scanned every word, searching for a crack, for a lie. It said Alexander Croft started his business from scratch in mid-2020 with courage and a family investment. June 2020. Tears fell without permission, splashing onto the laptop's touchpad. June 2020 was the month Ethan was declared dead, while I was wailing, hugging his wet headstone. While I was sleeping on a storefront stoop because his mother threw me out. While I was eating leftover scraps from a coworker's lunch, Ethan was busy building his business empire. He was busy shedding his skin to become Alexander. "Monsters," I hissed softly, my voice breaking. "You are all demons." I vividly remembered Ethan's life insurance policy. It was worth $500,000. He once told me it was to secure my future if he was gone. But when he died, his mother handled everything. She said I had no right to it because my name wasn't on some updated family document. She said the money was all used to pay off Ethan's massive gambling debts. Lies. All of it was lies. That death benefit, the blood money from his fake death, they used it as capital for this luxurious new life. They stole my future. They stole my tears, and they built a palace on the corpse of my marriage. Not yet finished torturing myself, I turned to social media. The article mentioned Alexander's wife, Olivia Vance, the only daughter of a renowned hotel magnate. I searched for Olivia's social media account. It wasn't private. Of course, the rich love to flaunt their lives, don't they? Her profile was like a lifestyle magazine catalog. Photos from vacations in Europe, designer handbags that could buy a small house, and of course, intimate photos with Ethan. I scrolled down, further and further. The more I scrolled, the more it hurt. It felt like slicing my own skin with a razor blade, but I couldn't stop. I had to know since when. I had to know how rotten this betrayal was. My hand stopped on a photo posted 5 years ago. The date, oh God, July 20th, 2020. That was exactly 40 days after Ethan's death. It should have been the day of his memorial. A day when I was still wearing black, sitting alone on the floor of my tiny apartment, praying for his soul because his mother said she had no money for a service. But in that photo, Ethan was wearing a slick silk shirt, holding a glass of wine, smiling broadly while wrapping his arm around Olivia. And beside them, sitting elegantly and holding a plate of cake, was Martha. She was beaming. There was no trace of sadness on her face, no sign of a mother who had just lost her son. I read Olivia's caption, "Late post. Celebrating my love, Alex's first successful contract, and my dearest mother-in-law's health. New beginnings." A celebration. What were they celebrating? Their success in deceiving the world? Their success in throwing me away like garbage? My chest tightened so much I felt like I was going to be sick. My mind drifted back to that day, July 20th, 5 years ago. I remembered going to Martha's house, begging for a $20 loan to buy groceries because my pay as a dishwasher hadn't come through. She didn't open the gate. She yelled from behind her tall brick wall, "Get away from here! Don't bring your bad luck to this old widow's house." "I don't have any money." It turned out, behind that wall, they were having a party with wine and cake. I covered my own mouth to stifle a hysterical scream so I wouldn't wake my neighbors. My body shook violently. I wasn't just betrayed. I felt like I had been stomped on until I was formless. They weren't human. They were monsters wearing human masks. My phone on the bed suddenly vibrated loudly. I jumped, startled. The wall clock showed 2 a.m. Who would be sending a message at this hour? With a trembling hand, I reached for the phone. A message from an unknown number. No profile picture. I opened it. It was just one short sentence that made my blood freeze. Pretty flight attendant. Enjoy the life you have now. Don't dig your own grave by meddling in the affairs of the dead. We're watching you. And beneath the text message was a photo. A photo of my apartment door, taken from the outside, from the dark hallway in front of my room. The photo had been taken just seconds ago. The phone slipped from my hand onto the mattress. The sound was muffled by the thin foam, but its effect was like a bomb exploding inside my head. They were outside, right now. In a blind panic, I leaped from the bed. My foot tripped on the fan cord, and the old appliance crashed to the floor, adding to the noise in the otherwise silent, small room. I lunged for the door, making sure the deadbolt and chain lock were securely fastened. Not enough. I dragged my plastic dresser, pushing it with all my trembling strength until it slid to block the door. Panting, I backed away until my back hit the cold wall. My eyes stared wildly at the flimsy wooden door, as if on the other side, Ethan and his mother were standing there, grinning, holding shovels. "Oh God, what do I do?" I whispered hoarsely. My body slumped down until I was sitting, hugging my knees in the corner of the room. I turned off the main light. I only felt safe in the darkness, afraid my shadow might be visible through the vent. That night, the terror came not just from the threatening message, but from dark memories that crept back up like quicksand. I remembered my first night after being kicked out by Martha 5 years ago. The rain hadn't stopped. I took shelter under the awning of a closed shop. My stomach was cramping with hunger. I hadn't eaten all day. I only had $1 in the pocket of my house dress, the only thing I managed to grab before being dragged out. "Ethan, how could you?" I had whimpered then, thinking my husband was resting peacefully in the afterlife while I suffered on earth. How foolish I was, how naive the old Chloe was. While I was picking up a piece of bread someone threw in the trash because I was so hungry, Ethan was probably enjoying a Wagyu steak with his new wife. While I was sleeping, curled up in a bus station, getting kicked out by security who thought I was a vagrant, his mother was probably sleeping on a plush 5-star hotel mattress, celebrating her son's death. My tears fell again. Not tears of sadness, but tears of thick, suffocating despair. I felt small, so small. Who was I? Just a contract flight attendant renting a tiny room in a narrow alley. My salary was enough to eat and save a little, but not enough to fight a conglomerate like Alexander Croft. They had money, power, and the audacity to fake a death. If they could deceive the government and an insurance company, how hard would it be to eliminate one solitary woman like me? Maybe I should just stop, the cowardly part of me whispered. Delete the photo, forget everything. Pretend I don't know. The important thing is that I'm alive. The fear paralyzed my logic. My hand reached for my phone, intending to delete the photo of the license plate I took at the airport. My index finger trembled over the delete icon. Ping. Another notification. A new message from the same number. I almost threw the phone. I was so startled. With bated breath, I opened the screen. This time, it wasn't a verbal threat, just a picture of a bank transfer receipt. The amount was $10,000. The description read, "Condolences. Go far away, resign, and move out of state. Or we'll send you to the next world." I stared at the numbers. $10,000. For the old Chloe, this was a huge amount of money, enough to start a small business back home, enough to forget Los Angeles. But then my eyes caught the sender's name on the digital transfer slip. Not Alexander, not Martha. The sender was Miller Prosperity Group. Miller. Ethan was using his real last name for his shell company. Suddenly, the fear that had been choking me began to recede, replaced by an overwhelming sense of disgust. They thought I was some cheap whore who could be paid off after they had ruined my life. They thought my dignity and my 5 years of suffering could be bought for $10,000. They had seriously misjudged their opponent. For the past 5 years, I didn't just learn how to serve coffee on a plane. I learned how to survive. The harshness of the streets had killed the old, weeping Chloe. I put the phone down. I wasn't going to delete anything, but I couldn't move alone either. I needed a shield. I needed a sword. My mind drifted to a brief encounter 6 months ago on a flight from Tokyo to Los Angeles. A male passenger had left his passport in his seat. I ran after him all the way to the jet bridge. The man, a young lawyer with sharp but friendly eyes, gave me his business card as a thank you. "I'm Leo, a specialist in criminal law and family disputes. If you, my kind flight attendant, ever get into legal trouble or have some bad people who need a lesson, call me. Free of charge for my passport's savior." I stood up, turned on the light, and tore through the messy drawer of my vanity. Piles of receipts, hair ties, and loose change were shoved aside roughly. Where is that card?" I mumbled frantically. My heart was racing. I knew they were watching me. I had to act before dawn. In the very back corner of the drawer, tucked between an old savings passbook, the matte black business card lay there. The writing was printed in raised gold foil. Leo Grant and Partners, law firm. I snatched the card like a person dying of thirst finding a spring. Without a second thought, even though the clock showed 3 a.m., I dialed the personal number listed on it. The line rang, once, twice, 3 times. I was about to hang up in despair when suddenly a groggy voice, the kind of voice someone has when they've just woken up, answered. "Hello? Who is this at this hour?" I took a deep breath, swallowing the bitter taste in my mouth. "Hello, Leo. This is Chloe, the flight attendant who found your passport." My voice was shaky but firm. "Your offer to teach some bad people a lesson? Is it still valid?" There was a moment of silence on the other end. Then the sound of rustling sheets, followed by a voice that was now sharp and alert. "Chloe, of course. Who's bothering you? A difficult passenger?" "No," I replied, my eyes fixed on the door still blocked by my dresser. "A ghost. I'm being terrorized by a ghost from the past who turns out to be very much alive. And he's a millionaire who just transferred me hush money." "Wait," Leo cut in quickly, his voice now fully awake. "Don't say anything else on a regular call. Don't touch that money. Lock your door. Send me your location on an encrypted messaging app. I'm on my way now." The call ended. I stared at the dark phone screen. My knees felt weak, but this time from relief. I wasn't alone anymore. But as I was about to send my location, my eyes caught something odd in the corner of the room, near the window where the curtain was slightly parted by the wind. On the floor lay a thick brown envelope that seemed to have been slipped under the door or through a vent while I was asleep earlier, before the threatening messages started. With a trembling hand, I picked up the envelope. There was no sender's name, just rough handwriting in red marker. "For the widow of Ethan Miller." My heart stopped. I tore open the envelope. It wasn't money. It wasn't a threat. It was a hospital lab report, dated 5 years ago, 2 days before Ethan died. It showed a medical diagnosis under the name Ethan Miller, and the diagnosis made all the blood drain from my body. A fact that turned all the logic of his death and my supposed infertility, which they had force-fed me, completely upside down. The paper in my hand shook along with my uncontrollably trembling body. The dim light of the room seemed to highlight one brutal word printed in bold in the medical conclusion: non-obstructive azoospermia. Patient Ethan Miller. My world collapsed for the second time that night. For all 5 years of our marriage, every time I got my period, Martha would look at me with disgust. She was the one who dragged me to painful folk healers, forced me to drink bitter herbs that made me vomit, and spewed toxic words at every family gathering. "Useless, barren woman. What's the point of being a wife if you can't provide a grandchild? Look at Ethan's cousin. She already has 2 kids. You're just embarrassing the family." I swallowed all those insults. I believed I was the flawed one, the one who was lacking. I even used to apologize to Ethan, crying at night, for failing to give him a child. And what did Ethan do? He would just hug me and say with a hint of disappointment, "Be patient, honey. Maybe it's just not our time yet." Liar. He knew. They both knew. Ethan was the one who was sterile. Ethan was the one who couldn't have children. But they let me be the scapegoat for their pride. They let me carry the burden of being a barren woman alone in front of the world, while they kept this medical secret tightly sealed. "You devils," I growled under my breath, crumpling the paper in my fist. A sharp knock on the door made me jump. "Knock," Knock. Chloe, it's Leo. Open the door. The baritone voice from outside sounded urgent. I peeked through the peephole. The man stood there, wearing a wet leather jacket and a cap pulled low. It was really him, Leo, the lawyer I had called. I quickly moved the dresser and unlocked the door. Leo entered swiftly, immediately relocking the door behind him and scanning the room with the wary eyes of a hunter. "Are you safe?" he asked curtly, his breath coming in short pants. I nodded numbly, then handed him the brown envelope and showed him the transfer receipt on my phone. Leo took the evidence, sat on the edge of the bed, and began to study it in silence. His initially calm face slowly hardened. His jaw tightened when he saw the $10,000 transfer amount. "This isn't just a domestic dispute, Chloe," Leo murmured, his eyes flashing sharply behind his glasses. "This is a multi-layered felony, faking a death, insurance fraud, identity theft, and now witness intimidation and attempted bribery." He looked at me seriously. "Who slipped you this medical report?" "I don't know. Someone else is watching this building besides Ethan's people," I answered hoarsely. Leo tapped the lab report. "Whoever the sender is, they're an enemy within Ethan's camp. This is our ace, Chloe. With this paper, we know another motive for why he faked his death. Maybe it wasn't just about the insurance money. Maybe he was running from the shame or family pressure of his infertility." Leo took out his work tablet, his fingers moving nimbly, tracing a digital trail. "Alexander Croft. Let's see who we're up against." The room was quiet for a moment, filled only by the sound of drizzling rain outside and Leo's typing. I sat hugging my knees. The hatred in my chest had frozen into a cold resolve. I wasn't going to run. I wasn't going to move out of state. "Chloe," Leo called out suddenly. His tone was strange, a mix of shock and irony. "Come look at this." I moved closer, looking at the tablet screen Leo held out. He had pulled up the Instagram profile of Ethan's new wife, Olivia Vance. 3 hours ago, Leo pointed. On the screen was a photo of Olivia smiling happily, holding a pregnancy test with 2 clear pink lines. Beside her, Ethan, A.K.A. Alexander, had his arm around her waist, kissing her cheek. The caption read, "So grateful. Finally, baby number 2 is on the way. Big brother Jacob is going to have a little sibling. Thank you, hubby, for completing my life. Number blessed. Pregnant. Alexander. Olivia. Family." I stared, speechless. My brain tried to process the conflicting information. "Wait," I whispered, pointing to a photo of a toddler, about 3 years old, in a previous post. "That's their first child." "Exactly," Leo replied, a dangerous, crooked smile forming on his lips. "His name is Jacob, born 3 years ago, and now his wife is pregnant again." I looked at Leo, then back at the crumpled lab report in my left hand. Non-obstructive azoospermia. That means 0 sperm count. 0. It's biologically impossible for him to conceive naturally. "Leo," my voice was choked. "If this paper is authentic, and Ethan has been permanently sterile for the past 5 years, then those children are not his biological children," Leo finished coldly. A chilling silence filled my small apartment. This revelation was more explosive than any bomb. "There are 2 possibilities," Leo analyzed quickly, his lawyer's instincts taking over. 1. Ethan was miraculously cured, which is virtually impossible for a case of non-obstructive azoospermia this severe. 2. Olivia used a sperm donor, and they kept it a secret to maintain the perfect image of a successful family. Or, I said slowly, a wicked thought crossing my mind, Olivia cheated, and poor, pathetic Ethan is being played for a fool by his new wife, just like he played me. Leo let out a small, humorless laugh. "Whatever the scenario, Chloe, we just found a golden crack in their fortress. Money, power, and women. Ethan built his life on lies, but the foundation of his own marriage is apparently rotten." Leo stood up, grabbing his jacket. "Pack your essentials. Laptop, documents, a few changes of clothes. You're not sleeping here tonight. They know where you are. You're coming to a safe house owned by my firm." "Where are we going after that?" I asked, hurriedly stuffing clothes into a backpack. Leo looked at me intently. "We're not running, Chloe. We're going on the offensive." He held up the lab report. Tomorrow, we will verify the authenticity of this document with the hospital that issued it. If it's real, congratulations, Chloe. You're not just holding proof of Ethan's crimes, you're also holding the key to the utter destruction of his male ego. As I stepped out of that apartment into the pre-dawn rain, I glanced at my phone one last time. The photo of Ethan kissing Olivia's pregnant belly. Enjoy your fake happiness while you can, Ethan, I thought, because I'm about to introduce you to a very real hell. However, as we walked toward Leo's car parked at the end of the dark alley, my eyes caught the silhouette of someone standing behind a streetlight, watching us. The person was wearing a rain poncho, their face obscured, and in their hand they held something that glinted in the streetlight. A camera with a long telephoto lens. The safe house apartment owned by Leo's law firm was in an exclusive downtown Los Angeles high-rise, with layered security that allowed me to finally breathe a little easier. I had been hiding here for 3 days, reassembling the mental fragments that had shattered. There was no more weeping Chloe in the corner of a dingy room. In front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror, I saw the reflection of a new woman. My hair, usually tied in a simple flight attendant's bun, now flowed in soft waves, professionally styled by a mobile salon Leo had arranged. I was wearing a rented, high-end emerald green silk gown that hugged my body perfectly, paired with a designer handbag that cost as much as a used car. "Are you ready?" Leo appeared in the doorway, watching my reflection. His eyes held a flicker of admiration, quickly masked by cool professionalism. "Ready," I said firmly. "Is the schedule confirmed?" 100%. Olivia has a weekly treatment at a Beverly Hills spa every Thursday at 10 a.m. She'll be alone today, no bodyguard, because her husband is busy cleaning up the mess you made at the airport the other day. I smirked. Rumor has it Ethan is frantically trying to figure out who sent a funeral wreath to his office yesterday. A little bit of psychological warfare I orchestrated with Leo. "Remember, Chloe," Leo said seriously, handing me the key to a European sedan. "No emotion, no confrontation. Become the best friend she never had. Get inside her circle, make her trust you, and then find out who the biological father of her children is." I nodded, taking the key. "I'll be the sweetest snake." "Leo, don't worry." The scent of lavender aromatherapy and soft instrumental music greeted me as I stepped into the lobby of the spa. This was where the wives of millionaires and L.A. socialites came to spend their husbands' money. I sat in the VIP waiting area, pretending to read a fashion magazine while occasionally checking my phone. My eyes glanced toward the reception desk. A young, pregnant woman in a designer maternity dress walked in, Olivia Vance. She looked tired, her face etched with a frown. She was complaining to the receptionist. "Excuse me, how could this happen? I specifically booked my therapist, Maria. Why was she replaced? My skin is sensitive, you know." Her voice was spoiled and a little high-pitched. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Croft." But Maria called in sick unexpectedly. The receptionist answered, her face pale. "Ugh, this is just ruining my mood," Olivia huffed, throwing her Hermes bag onto the sofa next to me. "This was my chance." I closed the magazine slowly and looked at her with a measured, sympathetic smile. "It's so hard to find a therapist you click with, isn't it? When you have to switch, it feels like your whole body just ends up more sore." Olivia turned, slightly surprised that someone had responded. She scanned my appearance from head to toe, assessing my bag, shoes, and dress. Her gaze softened when she recognized me as one of her own. "Totally. It's so annoying. Especially being pregnant like this, my body aches all over, and my husband is busy with work," she vented, instantly confiding as if we were old friends. "That's the life of a successful businessman. They're always busy," I baited gently. "My husband is the same way." I used to complain, but eventually I realized that pampering yourself is more important than waiting for your husband to come home. Olivia's eyes lit up. "Wow, that is so true. You totally get me." "Oh, I'm Olivia, by the way." She extended her hand, soft, manicured, and adorned with a diamond ring bought with my husband's death insurance money. I shook it warmly. "Kate. Just call me Kate." I intentionally chose a simple name to avoid triggering any memories for Ethan if he heard it later. "Nice to meet you, Kate." "You're so beautiful. Your skin is amazing. Where do you get your treatments?" The conversation flowed easily. It turned out Olivia was the type of woman who was lonely amidst her luxury. She needed a friend, needed validation. I slipped through that crack with ease. I praised her taste, listened to her complain about her meddlesome mother-in-law. Yes, she complained about Martha, who apparently interfered in her household affairs constantly. I offered wise advice from the perspective of an independent woman. 2 hours passed in a flash. We finished our treatments together. Olivia looked much happier than when she arrived. "Kate, I swear, talking to you is so refreshing. My other socialite friends just want to show off their new bags." "No one is easy to talk to about real family problems," Olivia said enthusiastically as we walked out to the valet parking. "Let's get coffee sometime," I said with a sweet smile. Suddenly, Olivia tapped her forehead. "Oh, wait! I have an event this weekend. Kate, you have to come." She reached into her bag and pulled out a physical invitation with a maroon velvet cover and gold foil lettering. "It's for my 5th wedding anniversary with Alex. It's at the Beverly Hilton's Grand Ballroom. Please come. I really need a friend to talk to so I don't get bored listening to a bunch of men talk about stocks." My hand trembled slightly as I accepted the invitation. 5th wedding anniversary. My eyes locked on the date printed on the invitation. The party was on January 25th. My blood boiled in silence. January 25th, 5 years ago, was the day I signed a document waiving all rights to marital assets in front of Martha's lawyer, after she threatened to have me arrested on false charges of stealing jewelry. That day was the day of my destruction. And it turned out, on the very same day, Ethan and Olivia had formalized their secret marriage, or whatever they called their illicit relationship, before it was legitimized by the state under his new identity. "Wow, this must be a lavish affair," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But won't I be intruding? I mean, would your husband mind a stranger being there?" "Oh, Alex does whatever I say. Besides, he's been so stressed lately. He said some crazy person from his past is harassing him. So I want to make him happy at this party." Olivia chattered on, completely oblivious. "A crazy person," I thought. I smiled widely, the smile of a predator who had just been given the key to its prey's cage. "Of course, Olivia, I'll be there. I can't wait to meet the amazing husband who made a beautiful woman like you fall in love." Olivia gave me a brief hug, air kisses on both cheeks, and then got into her Escalade, the same one I saw at the airport. As the car pulled away, my smile vanished. I stared at the velvet invitation in my hand. This wasn't just a party invitation. It was a ticket to the slaughterhouse. I took out my phone and typed a short, coded message to Leo, ticket in hand. "Prepare the best dress and the special gift we discussed last night. We are going to blow this party wide open." I turned to walk to my car, but after just 2 steps, the corner of my eye caught a reflection in the glass of a storefront across the street. A man in a baseball cap was standing behind a streetlight, lowering a camera with a long lens, the same man from outside my apartment. But this time, he wasn't hiding. He gave me a stiff, deliberate wave, as if to say hello, and in his free left hand, he held a small flight attendant doll with a red cord tied tightly around its neck. The terror of the strangled doll didn't make me take a single step back. Instead, it became the fuel that ignited my courage to its boiling point. Leo immediately worked on securing street CCTV footage to track the stalker, while I focused on the main mission, the party celebrating 5 years of betrayal. That night, the Beverly Hilton was bathed in golden light. Luxury cars lined up at the entrance, disgorging guests draped in diamonds and silk. I stepped out of Leo's black sedan wearing a blood-red evening gown with an elegant open back, a color I had chosen deliberately to symbolize courage, danger, and vengeance. "Remember, don't drink anything you haven't seen poured." Leo's voice buzzed faintly in the invisible earpiece in my right ear. He was in a surveillance van in the parking garage, monitoring the situation through a button camera on my clutch. "Understood," I whispered back. I walked into the grand ballroom. The air inside was chilled by the air conditioning, but the atmosphere was thick with a false warmth that fueled the guests' egos. In the center of the room, a massive, 6-foot-tall wedding cake stood majestically, topped with a sugar sculpture of a couple dancing. How ironic. My eyes swept the room. It didn't take long to find them. On a small, elevated stage decorated with thousands of white roses, Ethan, or Alexander, stood proudly in a black tuxedo. Beside him, Olivia glowed in a lavish maternity gown, and on the other side, Martha sat on a carved wooden throne like a queen mother. They smiled, greeted guests, and flaunted the happiness they had built on my grave. I took a deep breath, put on the sweetest smile I had practiced in the mirror, and walked through the crowd toward them. "Kate, you finally made it," Olivia exclaimed joyfully when she saw me in the receiving line. Her voice was loud enough to make Ethan and his mother turn simultaneously. Time seemed to stop. The moment Ethan's eyes met mine was the most satisfying moment of my life. His face, which had been flushed from laughing with colleagues, instantly turned as white as a sheet. The champagne flute in his right hand tilted, spilling some of its contents onto the expensive carpet. Beside him, Martha's jaw dropped. Her eyes bulged as if they were about to pop out of her head. Her wrinkled hand gripped the arm of her chair, trembling violently. They were seeing a ghost. The ghost of the poor woman they had thrown away, now standing elegantly before them in a dress worth thousands. "Good evening, Olivia. You look absolutely beautiful," I greeted her warmly, ignoring the 2 living statues beside her. "Thank you, Kate. Let me introduce you to my husband, Alex, and my mother-in-law, Martha," Olivia said innocently, unaware of the suffocating tension in the air. I extended my hand to Ethan. "Good evening, Mr. Croft. I'm a new friend of your wife's." Ethan didn't move. His breathing sounded heavy. Cold sweat began to form on his temples. He didn't dare shake my hand. He was afraid my touch would burn him alive. "Honey, why are you just standing there? Shake her hand." "That's so rude," Olivia chided playfully, nudging her husband's arm. With the stiff movements of a robot, Ethan took my hand. His palm was cold and clammy. I squeezed it a little harder than a normal handshake, digging my red nails slightly into his skin. "A pleasure to meet you, sir," I said with a meaningful tone, my eyes boring into his terrified ones. "You look so much like my late husband. The only difference is, my husband was a heartless poor man, while you're a loving, successful businessman." Ethan's jaw clenched. He pulled his hand away roughly. "Thank you," he hissed quietly. I turned to Martha. The old woman looked away, not daring to meet my gaze. Her lips moved silently, perhaps chanting a prayer to ward off demons. "Mrs. Miller, are you well?" I asked politely. "Your face reminds me of my old mother-in-law. It's a shame, though. She was a very forgetful person, always forgetting about her major sins." Olivia let out a light laugh. "Oh, Kate, you're so funny. Mom really is always forgetting where she puts her glasses. Please, enjoy the food," Ethan cut in quickly, his voice trembling with suppressed rage and panic. He gestured to the security guards with his eyes. I gave a small, knowing smile and excused myself from the stage. I knew Ethan wanted to throw me out, but he couldn't do it without causing a scene in front of hundreds of business partners and the lifestyle reporters covering the event. He was a prisoner of his own image. I walked to the buffet table and picked up a glass of mineral water. "Target is getting agitated, Chloe," Leo's voice came through my earpiece. "Ethan just sent a message to his head of security. They're going to try to escort you out through the side kitchen door." "Let them try," I replied softly, pretending to dab my lips with a napkin. "Now it's time for the first gift." I took my phone out of my clutch. A file was ready to be sent via text to Ethan's personal number. Leo had already hacked Ethan's phone notifications to sound at maximum volume, even in silent mode. Send. 3 seconds later, on the stage, a loud notification ping echoed from Ethan's suit pocket. Ping. Ethan irritably reached into his pocket. He opened his phone screen. From a distance, I could see his expression change. From tense to pure terror. What he was seeing was a photo of his 5-year-old sperm analysis report, side by side with a photo of him kissing Olivia's pregnant belly. The caption read, "A sterile man with 2 kids. A miracle or a tragedy?" Ethan looked up, his eyes wildly searching for me in the crowd. I raised my glass of water toward him, offering a silent toast of death from afar while smiling sweetly. He swayed. He almost fell if he hadn't grabbed onto a decorative pillar. Olivia looked confused and asked what was wrong, but Ethan brushed her off harshly. Suddenly, the ballroom lights dimmed. The orchestra stopped playing. An MC walked onto the stage with a booming, enthusiastic voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention on the main screen? As the highlight of our evening, Mr. Alexander Croft has prepared a special video presentation of his 5-year journey of love with Mrs. Olivia Croft. Let's all watch The Journey of Love." The massive LED screen behind the stage lit up. Ethan's eyes widened, his face ashen. He screamed, "No, don't play it. Stop!" He ran toward the sound operator at the side of the stage, forgetting his dignity, forgetting his guests. He thought I had swapped the video. He thought his secrets were about to be exposed. But he was wrong. I hadn't swapped the video. Not yet. The original video played, showing romantic photos of them in Paris, London, the Maldives. The guests applauded, confused by Ethan's hysterical behavior as he tried to shut down his own perfectly normal video. "What's wrong with Alex?" I heard some guests near me whisper. "He's acting like he's possessed." I laughed quietly. This was psyops, psychological warfare. I wanted him to feel like he was going crazy. I wanted him to be paranoid. I wanted him to humiliate himself in public, out of his own fear. Ethan stood panting beside the operator, realizing the video was normal. He turned to look at me with a murderous glare, his face crimson with shame and fury. Olivia stared at her husband with teary eyes, embarrassed by his baseless screaming. But the game wasn't over. As the lights came back on, a male waiter approached me. His head was bowed, his cap pulled low. "Ma'am," he whispered, slipping a piece of paper into my hand. "Someone is waiting for you on the rooftop. He says he has proof of who the biological father of Mrs. Croft's children is. Come alone, or this secret disappears forever." I looked at the waiter, but he had already vanished quickly through the kitchen door. "Leo, did you hear that?" I whispered. "I heard it. It's a trap, Chloe. Don't go up there," Leo commanded firmly. I crumpled the note in my hand. Curiosity and a sense of danger battled in my mind. If I could find out who the biological father was, I could destroy Ethan completely. But if I went up there, I might not come back. I looked at Ethan on the stage, who was busy trying to calm his mother. My eyes shifted to the emergency exit that led to the rooftop stairs. "I have to take this risk, Leo," I whispered, then unilaterally switched off my earpiece. I walked toward the emergency exit, leaving the boring party behind, heading into a darkness that promised either answers or death. The night wind on the rooftop of the 5-star hotel was fierce, whipping my hair into a mess and slapping at my red dress. The cold was bone-chilling, but the cold sweat running down my back was far more freezing. Under the dim glow of the helipad lights, the man in the cap stood with his back to me, smoking. White smoke billowed and was carried away by the wind. "Who are you?" I asked loudly, trying to hide the tremor in my voice. My right hand gripped the clutch containing the button camera, hoping Leo could still pick up a signal even though I had cut the audio feed. The man turned. Half of his face was destroyed. There was a horrific burn scar on his left cheek, but I recognized those eyes. Eyes I used to see often when he drove Ethan to work. "Rick," I gasped in disbelief. He was Ethan's personal driver back when we were poor. Or more accurately, a driver from the company where Ethan used to work. "Long time no see, Mrs. Miller." His voice was raspy like sandpaper. "Or should I call you the foolish widow? Just like me, the foolish driver who was used and then thrown away." Rick flicked his cigarette butt and pulled a thick envelope from his worn jacket. "You want to know who the father of Olivia's kids is? The answer is in the mirror." Rick pointed to his own disfigured face. Olivia was lonely. Ethan, a.k.a. Alex, was busy building his image. I was the one who comforted the lonely lady in the back of the car, at their villa, wherever, until I demanded he take responsibility when she got pregnant with the first child. And what did Mr. Croft do? He had people burn down my apartment. This face, this is a gift from your husband. I was stunned. This plot was far more depraved than I could have imagined. Ethan knew he was sterile. He knew his wife was cheating with the driver, but he raised the illegitimate child to maintain his image of a happy family and silenced Rick by trying to burn him alive. "Take this," Rick threw the envelope at my feet. An illegal DNA test I stole from a hospital safe and videos of our activities. Destroy him, Chloe. Destroy that devil. Before I could bend down to pick up the envelope, the emergency door behind me was kicked open with a loud bang. Bang! 3 large, burly men stormed out. And behind them, strolling casually while adjusting his cufflinks, was Ethan. His face was no longer panicked like it was on stage. It was now cold, cruel, the face of a stone-cold killer. Well, a little reunion for the trash. Ethan laughed softly, his voice echoing eerily on the quiet rooftop. I suspected there was a rat playing games. So, Rick, you're still alive after all. Rick took a step back, fear evident in his eyes. The trauma of the past was overwhelming him. And you, Chloe? And, quote, the redditstories together now that. Ethan looked at me with a gaze that made my blood stop flowing. He stepped forward, crushing the envelope of evidence under his expensive leather shoe. You think you're so clever? Coming to my party, terrorizing me with a medical report. Did you forget who I am? I know who you are, I answered, lifting my chin even though my knees were shaking. You're Ethan Miller, a cowardly husband who faked his own death for insurance money and to escape gambling debts. You're a sterile man who let your wife get pregnant by your driver to cover up your own shame. Shut up, Ethan screamed, his face turning purple with rage. He lunged forward, grabbing my neck with one hand. His grip was strong, cutting off my air supply. My feet lifted slightly off the ground. I struggled, clawing at his hand, but his strength was far greater than mine. You ruined everything, Ethan hissed right in my face, his spittle hitting my cheek. For 5 years I built this perfect life. My mother was happy. I was respected. The money flowed. Why couldn't you just die in poverty? Why did you have to show up again? Let go, I gasped. My vision started to blur. Tonight you're going to die for real, Chloe, Ethan whispered cruelly. He dragged me to the edge of the building. The safety railing was only waist high. Below, the streetlights looked as small as fireflies. A fall from here would mean being shattered to pieces. The police would rule it a suicide. A depressed ex-wife who couldn't move on. I smiled. In the midst of his deadly grip, I smiled broadly. Ethan was confused by my smile. Why are you smiling? You're insane. Because, my voice was hoarse, your party invitation mentioned a live stream of your love story, didn't it? Ethan froze. Suddenly, a roar erupted from below. It wasn't the wind, it was the sound of hundreds of people screaming, the sound of chaos from the grand ballroom 5 floors below us. Leo, I whispered weakly. Now. On the giant LED screen inside the ballroom, the romantic video from Paris had been cut 2 minutes ago. It had been replaced by a live feed from the button camera in my clutch, which was lying on the rooftop floor, capturing Ethan's face as he choked me, and a microphone that was clearly recording every word of his vile confession. Hundreds of guests, reporters, business partners, Olivia, and Martha, they had all just watched the most realistic thriller of their lives. They heard Ethan admit to faking his death. They heard him admit he was sterile. They saw the true face of Alexander Croft as a cold-blooded murderer. The phone in Ethan's pocket began to ring and buzz manically. Not one call, but dozens of messages and calls pouring in at once. Ethan released his grip in shock. I collapsed onto the concrete floor, coughing and gasping for air. Ethan staggered backward, looking down at the ground below, then at his phone. His face turned deathly pale, whiter than a corpse. He realized what had just happened. His mask was shattered. His empire had crumbled in a matter of seconds. The emergency door opened again. This time, it wasn't thugs. Leo stood there, holding a gun, flanked by a squad of heavily armed police officers. "Ethan Miller," the police commander shouted, "hands in the air. You are surrounded for attempted murder, identity fraud, and grand larceny." Ethan looked at the police, then at me, and finally at Rick, who was smiling with satisfaction in a dark corner. He was cornered. From downstairs, I could hear the wail of ambulances. Maybe Martha had a heart attack, or Olivia had fainted after learning her children were the drivers. But the drama wasn't over. Ethan, his eyes wild like a wounded animal, suddenly burst into hysterical laughter. A horrifying, desperate laugh. He didn't raise his hands. Instead, he backed up and climbed onto the building's ledge. "You'll never put me in a cage," he screamed into the night wind. "I am Ethan Miller. I will not go back to being poor. I refuse." "Don't!" I screamed instinctively. Ethan looked at me one last time. His eyes were filled with a strange mix of hatred and sorrow. "See you in hell, my dear wife." And with a swift movement, he threw himself backward. His body plunged through the darkness of the night, met by horrified screams from the crowd in the hotel lobby below. The sirens of police cars and ambulances blared, shattering the Los Angeles night and creating a tragic symphony that served as the finale for the fake family's lavish party. On the hotel grounds, a crowd of curious onlookers was held back by yellow police tape. They pushed and shoved, their phones held high, recording the mound of a body now covered by a white tarp. I stood in the hotel lobby, watching the scene from behind thick glass. There were no tears, no tightness in my chest. Strangely, all I felt was a liberating emptiness, as if a malignant tumor had just been removed from my soul. "It's over, Chloe," Leo's deep voice said beside me. He draped his suit jacket over my exposed shoulders, warding off the biting chill of the lobby's air conditioning. "The police have confirmed it. He died instantly." I nodded slowly. Ethan had chosen his final shortcut. He would rather die a coward than live with the shame and face prison. That was so typical of him, selfish to the very end. "What about them, his mother?" I asked flatly. Leo let out a long sigh. A massive stroke. A blood vessel in her brain burst when she saw her son jump. "She survived, but she's completely paralyzed. The doctors said she might never speak or move again. She'll be trapped in her own body, with a mind that is fully aware of all her sins. Karma isn't just a sweet word in novels. It's real, and it collects its debts with interest." Martha, the woman whose words were as sharp as a razor, was now silenced by fate. She would spend the rest of her life staring at the ceiling of a state-run nursing home because all of Ethan's assets were seized by the government, with no one to visit her. And Olivia, that poor woman, was taken to the police station for questioning. The DNA test that Rick provided was enough to prove adultery. The prestigious Vance family immediately disowned her that very night. She lost her husband, her social status, and her children now carried the stigma of being the illegitimate offspring of a disfigured former driver. "Let's go home," Leo said gently, his hand touching the back of mine. "There are no more ghosts here." 6 months later, LAX was bustling this morning. The sound of rolling suitcases on marble floors, departure announcements, and the aroma of coffee from chain cafes filled the air. This was my world, the place where I had found myself again. I walked tall through the departure terminal. My lead flight attendant's uniform, in a deep maroon, fit me perfectly. A golden pin shaped like wings was attached to my left breast, signifying my new position as a senior flight instructor. "Good morning, Miss Evans," the junior flight attendants greeted me, lined up neatly, looking at me with admiration. "Morning." Remember, a smile is our weapon, but firmness is our shield. "Never let a passenger underestimate you," I said, my tone firm but friendly. They nodded in unison. I smiled. I was once a weak woman who begged for love from her husband and mother-in-law. Now I was a woman standing on her own 2 feet, respected for my abilities, not for who my husband was. After finishing the briefing, I sat for a moment at my favorite coffee shop, waiting for my flight. My phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. But the profile picture showed a nurse in a government-run nursing home. "Good morning, Miss Evans. Sorry to bother you. The patient named Martha Miller has been moaning and crying since yesterday. Her eyes keep darting toward the door as if she's waiting for someone. We found your number written on a crumpled piece of paper under her pillow. Would you be willing to visit? She seems to be in great distress." I stared at the message for a long time. I imagined Martha, who once flaunted her gold jewelry, now lying in a bed in a musty nursing home, unable to shoo away a fly on her face, hoping for a visit from the daughter-in-law she had thrown out like a dog. My finger moved across the screen, typing a reply. "I'm sorry, nurse. You have the wrong number. My mother-in-law passed away 5 years ago. Please do not contact this number again. Send. Block contact." I placed the phone on the table with a feeling of incredible lightness. I wasn't being cruel. I was being just. I had already forgiven her. But forgiveness didn't mean I had to step back into the same mud. Let her live out the rest of her days with the memory of her own cruelty. Black coffee, a little raw sugar, just the way you like it. A familiar voice made me look up. Leo stood there, smiling broadly, holding 2 paper coffee cups. He wasn't wearing his stiff lawyer's suit, but a casual button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He looked handsome. "Leo, where are you going?" I asked, surprised. "On vacation," he said casually, sitting in the chair across from me. "I just won a huge case. I need some R&R, and I happen to hear that the most beautiful flight instructor at this airline was back on duty today." I let out a small laugh, a warm blush spreading across my cheeks. "So you deliberately bought a ticket for my flight?" "I'd follow you anywhere, Chloe. As long as you'd let me," he said, his eyes looking deeply into mine. A sincere gaze I had never once received from Ethan in my entire life. The final boarding call for my flight echoed through the terminal. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. Leo stood up too, grabbing my cabin bag. "Allow me, Captain," he teased. We walked side by side toward the departure gate. Outside the giant glass windows, the airplane was waiting, ready to split the clouds. The sky outside was a brilliant, cloudless blue. My past was buried with Ethan's shattered body. And my future. My future stretched out as vast as the sky, bright and entirely my own. But just as I was about to step onto the jet bridge, the corner of my eye caught a figure in the distance, behind the glass of the International Arrivals Terminal. The man was wearing a cap, looking straight at me. He raised his hand in a salute. Rick. He was still free. He held the dark secret that Ethan's death wasn't a pure suicide, but that it had a little push, a slight nudge when Ethan hesitated on the edge of the building that night. A push that the camera didn't see, hidden by the shadow of a pillar. I gave him a faint smile and a brief nod. That secret would go to the grave with us. Because sometimes, justice needs a little help from a dirty hand. I turned, linked my arm with Leo's, and stepped onto the plane. The door sealed shut behind me, locking away all the old stories, forever.